So today we're continuing the names of God. Uh, really, God has one name, right? What we call the Shem HaMeforash, the explicit name in English called the Tetragrammaton, the four-letter name. It's also called Shem Ben Arba Otiyot in Hebrew, the Yod Ke Vav Ke, and that is how we distinguish, like his personal name, right? Like my name is Sammy, as opposed to all the other names, which is more like a title, or it comes to signify some aspect that we relate to God, as in Elohim being like the supreme authority, right? So he says, Anochi Adonai Elohecha. This is I am the Shema Meforash, right? My name, I, God, am your Elohecha, your supreme authority. And so that's what we dealt with most of last week's lecture, and today we're going to go a little bit more into the names, and we're going to transition to a slightly different topic as well. Okay, so we saw the Elohim and the Yod Ke Vav Ke, and now we'll go into Yah. What is the name Yah? Right? We say Hallelujah. What is Hallelujah? Hallelujah means praise or glorify Yah, God, right? But what specifically does Yah refer to? But Yah is like the Tetragrammaton. It's like the Shema Meforash. Instead of Yod Ke Vav He, right? So it's half of it. It's like instead of calling me Samuel, right? Everyone knows me as Sammy, or sometimes even Sam, right? It's like a shorthand name for God. In fact, the Hachamim sometimes learn things from the shorthand name. For instance, regarding Amalek, it says Ki yad al kes Yah, right? The hand of Amalek is gripping the throne of God. But it says Kes Yah. Kes is Kiseh, just without the aleph, and Yah is the shorthand name, right? Yod Ke instead of Yod Ke Vav Ke, right? So Kes and Yah are both missing. They're missing letters, and the Hachamim say comes to teach us that as long as Amalek is around, the throne and glory of God is incomplete, and the name of God is incomplete. It says only once Amalek is destroyed, then it says Hashem Shalem, and the Kiseh can be Shalem, can be full. The whole lecture on that statement of the Hachamim, we're not going to get into that now. But yeah, it is like the Tetragrammaton. It's derived from it. And then there's the name Ehyeh. Who here is familiar with the name Ehyeh? It's not mentioned too much, but it's mentioned a couple of times, most distinguishedly or famously with Moshe Rabbeinu, right? What is the name Ehyeh? Ehyeh is closely related to the Tetragrammaton, right? It has the Hayah in it, which is Havaya, means existence, right? Just like Yah, it ends with the Yah. And it may derive from the name or from the root Hayah, to be. Its purpose is to keep the human mind from speculating about an incomprehensible, though real, being. When Moses asked, they will say to me, what is his name? It says, Ve'amiruni ma shemo, ma omar lahem, right? When God, or when Moshe encounters God in the burning bush, and God sends him to redeem the Jewish people from Egypt, and he says, and they're going to say, oh, you met God? So tell me his name. What is his name? What should I say to them? And what does God say? He says, what is his name? The answer was, in effect, why should they ask about something they cannot fully comprehend? Similarly, the angel replied, why do you ask my name, seeing that it is hidden? Right? This is with Manoach. When he meets Manoach, before releasing the angel, he says, tell me your name. And he says, Lama zet tish'al lishmi, why you ask my name? Vehu peni. And it's a mystery. So say to them, Ehyeh, right? I am that I am. Says, what is God? This whole book, the whole book is the Kuzzari is trying to reconcile these two understandings of God. One extreme is the philosophical God, which is a completely transcendent God, right? Completely above this universe. And the other one, we'll call it the Christian God, which is 100% immanent God, right? It's all about the religious experience. You're constantly talking to God, and you think that God is constantly talking to you, right? So what's this tension? Is God the transcendent God, or is it the immanent God? And what does God say? I am. I just am. Right? You can't reconcile these two gods. They seem to conflict in your mind, right? Is because he is so above our comprehension. And that's what he says. Why should you ask about something that you can't fully comprehend? There's certain things that are beyond your understanding. And that is what I am that I am means. He says, I just am. You can't understand how a transcendent God interacts with human affairs. That's fine. No one's asking you to understand. You just need to understand that that's the case. The one who exists and who is present for you whenever you seek me, right? So when they ask him, who is this God that sent you? He says, it is the God. It is the God, right, that spoke to your ancestors. It's the one that is providing over us. Do we understand everything about the divinity of and the nature of God? It's like, no, nobody understands it completely, but we know who it is. Let them seek no greater proof than my presence among them, and let them call me by that name. Right? Says this is how I shall be remembered from generation to generation. Moses therefore said to them, Ehyeh shelachani alechem. Right? Ehyeh is the one that sent me to you. God had already given Moses a similar assurance when he said, certainly I will be with you. He says, Ehyeh imach. What does that mean, Ehyeh imach? Literally in Hebrew, it means, I shall be with you. But when he's using his name, Ehyeh, right? Ehyeh means God, God, am with you. Ehyeh imach. He also says this to Joshua. He says this a couple of times. Ehyeh imach, meaning the God Ehyeh means the one that provides over you, whether you know who I am and what I am or not, right? I am providing over you, the divine providence. And this shall be the sign for you, right? That is, I have sent you, and I will be with you wherever you go. Everywhere you go. This is followed by the words, right? The God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, men who were continually accompanied by the divine presence, right? He says, when you speak to the children of Israel, you say, Ehyeh shelachani alechem, right? And then this is actually when you speak to the elders, if you want to be more specific, when you speak to the elders, it's Ehyeh Shelachani Alechem. When God is speaking to Moses, he says, Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. When Moses relays it to the elders, it's Ehyeh Shelachani Alechem. And when he speaks to the children, the people of Israel, it's Adonai Elohei Avraham and Yitzchak and Elohei Yaakov Shelachani Alechem. It's the God of your fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? The one who always had, the ones who always had this divine presence attached to them, which the Jewish people, right, know of the stories of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They're just a few generations back, their ancestors, right? So that is Ehyeh. And the title Elohei HaElohim, the God of gods, right, expresses that all governing powers depend upon God, who orders and directs them. Likewise, Adonai HaAdonim, right, the Lord of Lords, carries the same meaning. So Elohei Elohim, we saw already previously what Elohim means, right? The authorities, and we said it's also the powers or the different forces of nature that all the pagan nations associated as gods. So that's why we call him Elohei HaElohim, the master of all of these powers. And Adonai HaAdonim, we're going to get to Adon soon, right? What is the actual meaning of Adon or Adonai? We say Adonai, right? Our master. And El, what is El? This is a common, one of the more common references to God. We have Eloha and Elohim, and we also have El. El is derived from Ayalut, from the word Ayal. Ayal means power and strength, because he is the source of all powers while remaining exalted above them. For this reason, the expression Mi kamocha ba'elim, Adonai, right? Who is like you among the elim, among all the powers in the universe, right? Is appropriate using the plural form of El as powers, right? Elim, Mi kamocha ba'elim. And now we go to the title Holy, Kadosh. What is Kadosh? What does it mean when we refer to God as Kadosh? It expresses that God is exalted above every attribute of created beings, even though many such attributes are applied to him metaphorically. All right, so what is Kadosh? In a way, it's kind of like the opposite of Ehyeh, as opposed to Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, right? I am that I am. We said Ehyeh is refers to, call it that, a divine presence, that providence aspect of God, the immanent side of God. Kadosh is the exalted and transcendent God, right? They're the same God. And that's what Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh means. I am that I am. Just accept it, right? This is why Isaiah heard the angels proclaiming without ceasing, holy, 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 right? We say this in the Kiddusha, Kadosh, 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 Adonai Sebaot, right? Holy, holy, holy. How does Rav Soloveitchik explain this? Transcendent, transcendent, transcendent. He's completely transcendent out of this material world, out of the angelic world or metaphysical world. He is completely transcendent to all the worlds. This meaning is that God is too exalted, too holy, and too pure for any impurity among the people. Remember, we were studying about Tum'ah and Tahara, and we also discussed, along with Tum'ah and Tahara, Kiddusha. Something that is Kadosh cannot receive Tum'ah, because he is exalted, so nothing can touch him, so to speak, and defile him. In whose midst his presence dwell to affect him, right? He lives, so to speak. We have the Mishkan and we have the temple, and God has a Shekhinah living among us. However, he himself is transcendent, and even though his presence dwells among us, right, the impurity that we may bring cannot affect him. For the same reason, Isaiah saw him seated upon a throne, high and lifted up, right? V'hineh, right? Yoshev al kisei ram v'nisa. It's a high and completely. Nisa means kind of like it's above the ground, meaning it doesn't touch the ground. Holy also describes that which is spiritual, never taking, when he says spiritual means non-physical, never taking on a physical form and resembling nothing material. God is called the Holy One of Israel, Kadosh Israel. What does that mean, Kadosh Israel? Referring to the divine presence that is joined to Israel and all of its descendants in order to guide and govern them. Wait a minute. What did we say before? That's Ehyeh. So what does Kadosh Israel mean? Referring to divine presence that is joined to Israel. You say over here, Ehyeh imach, right? Men who continue accompanied by divine presence. That is Ehyeh. We said Kadosh is meant to be the opposite. So what is Kadosh Israel? This is the divine presence that is joined to Israel and all of its descendants in order to guide and govern them, not merely to have an external relationship with them. Anyone have any ideas how to understand this? He's basically, it seems, at least, it seems to me, that Kadosh Israel has almost the same meaning as Ehyeh imach. Two different names. Anyone have any suggestions? All right. Think about it. Think about it. Let me know next week if you have any answers. All right. Not everyone may truthfully say the God and my Holy One, right? Kiddushi, right? Elohai or Kiddushi, except as a traditional or metaphorical expression. In its true sense, only a prophet or a righteous person to whom the divine presence is attached may say this. Right? So that's already one difference that we have with Ehyeh imach. Right? Ze shemi le'olam v'ze zichri le'dor dor. Ehyeh imach, right, is kind of what he says to the people when they say, what is his name? Ehyeh imach. However, Kadosh Israel is not just anybody. It's only righteous person to whom the divine presence is attached. For this reason, the people said to the prophet, pray to the Lord our God. Why don't they do it themselves? Because he has a special relationship. The relationship of Israel to the other nations was meant to be like that of an angel to ordinary people. As it is written, you shall be holy, for I, the Lord your God, am holy. Kiddushim tihiyu ki kadosh ani. Right? You shall be holy, meaning in a way you should also be somewhat transcendent and elevated among everyone else. What is mamlechet kohanim? The goy kadosh, a holy nation. The same way that the angels are transcendent to mankind, right? It says you, Israel, are transcendent to the nations. All right, so think about that, and think about Kadosh Israel, and think about, right, Ehyeh imach. Again, this section is getting more philosophical / metaphysical and esoteric. This is all in preparation for going into Sefer HaYetzirah. We're going to touch upon Sefer HaYetzirah later on in this section. All right. Adonai. What is Adonai? Spelled Aleph, Dalet, Nun, Yod, right? I spelled it out here. Adonai refers to one who is infinitely exalted, that no true designation can fully describe him. We can only refer to him indirectly. We do this by pointing to things that he has created that serve as his immediate instruments. For example, we speak of the intellect and say that its seat is in the heart or the brain. We may even point to a particular person and say, this is his intellect. Like if you point to someone's head, right, and you say that's his intellect. In reality, however, we can only point to something that occupies a physical space. The person's intellect doesn't really reside in a person's head or in his heart or in what is his mind, his consciousness. Where does that reside? It's a non-physical entity. It doesn't reside in a person's body. It uses the person's body as instruments, right? But we are too physical to point to kind of just think in these abstract terms. If you think a lot, you'll get a headache. So it'll feel like your head is the place where your intellect is. But it's not. Your head is just a tool that accesses the intellect. Although every part of the body obeys the intellect, it does so through the heart and the brain, which are its primary instruments and are therefore regarded as the dwelling place of the intellect. And so too, the Shamayim, the heaven, it's not the dwelling place of God. They're just instruments that God uses to direct the forces of nature to do his bidding. Everything in the universe, right? God, we'll see, look at it the same way we point to the heavens, right? The Shamayim, and we say that God is in the Shamayim. It's the same way that you may think the intellect is in the mind or in the heart. It's not. Because that's a physical location, and this isn't something physical. Because it is in the immediate instrument through which the divine will is carried out, without the need of intermediate causes. We cannot point in the same way to composite things because they act only through intermediate causes and are connected to God through a chain of causation, or a chain of causality, for he is the cause of all causes, also known by the philosophers as the primary cause, or sibat hasibot, ilat ha'ilot. What does that mean? Everything in existence is the result of something. That thing is its cause. If you remember one of our previous courses, we were talking about the rainbow. Where does the rainbow come from? Right? What is the cause of the rainbow? It comes from the light rays, the sun rays, hitting droplets in the atmosphere, and the light refracting into many different colors and different wavelengths. All right. Well, what caused that ray, to come? This is what we said. Well, the cause of that is the sun. Says, well, what causes the sun to emit these rays? Says, well, it has a very, very high temperature. Well, what's causing this high temperature? Well, it's a very large mass. And the force of gravity is pulling everything to the center and condensing it. Well, what's causing gravity to do that? Well, the cause of gravity was the four fundamental forces splitting at the moment of creation. Well, what was the cause of the four fundamental splitting at the moment of creation? So that was the Big Bang. Well, what was the cause of the Big Bang? Right? So every single phenomenon is the result of some cause, which is the result of some cause, which is the result of some cause, right? So this is the chain of causality. When you get to the cause of all causes, right? The primary cause, sibat sibot, right? Well, that is God. And you see how quickly we went from a rainbow in our atmosphere to the Shamayim, to the heavens, as we perceive them, So that's why he's called dwells in the heaven, because the heaven is above us, and that is the closest place we can point to the primary cause. For this reason, Scripture speaks of he who dwells in heaven. For God is in the heaven, right? Ki Elohim b'shamayim, right? He who hayoshevi b'shamayim, he who sits in the heavens. We also speak of fear of the heaven, yira'at shamayim. What is yira'at shamayim? A fearing of heaven is in secret, or yaresh shamayim baseter, means someone who even, when he's alone, he doesn't do any sins. And of may you receive comfort from heaven if you ever go to a shiva, someone who is sitting shiva for a parent that passed away. We say, Mina shamayim tenuhamu, right? May you receive comfort from heaven. What is all these heavens, right? They're all pointing to God. Similarly, we speak of the pillar of fire and the pillar of cloud, saying that God was in them, right? Was God actually in them? No, these occupy some sort of physical location, and God is not bound by any physical form or physical location. There is no locality with God, because they carried out his will alone, meaning directly. They carried out his will directly, so therefore we associate it with God, or with God's will. Unlike ordinary fire and clouds, which arise through natural causes and dissipate through natural causes, right? The same applies to the devouring fire on top of the mountain, right? Osh esh ochela berosh ahar, what they saw in Mount Sinai, right? Which was associated directly with God, which was seen by all the people, and the spiritual vision seen only by those of a higher level, right? Wasn't atop the mountain, but under his feet, right? V'tachat raglav k'ma'aseh livnat sapir, right? Was something like a pavement of the sapphire stone, and was also called Vayiru'u. It says, and they saw Vayiru'u et Elohei Israel, and they saw the God of Israel. And under his feet, K'ma'aseh livnat sapir. Right? So what they saw, they associated with God, because that was the closest they can get to perceiving God. Not that that is what God looks like, or that that is where he is. The Holy Ark is referred to as the Lord of all the earth. But we saw previously also with the Aron, which was also referred to as the Aron of God, or sometimes where it says Kuma Adonai, ki yafusu, arise God, and it was really talking about the ark being lifted up, right? The Ark of the Covenant. So sometimes it is also directly associated with God, because miracles accompanied it as long as it was present, and ceased when it was gone. Similar to how we say that the eye sees, although in reality it is the nefesh, the soul, that sees, right? Our eyes don't actually see. Our eyes are light detectors. They detect light. What actually sees, what constructs a picture, right? That is our nefesh. That is our nefesh, our soul. That is we'll call it the software, the operating system of the body, right? Receives data through the eyes, through the ears, through the nose, and builds a picture. And that is what we see. It's really our imagination that is seeing. It's interpreting what our eyes detect, right? But it's not really correct to associate sight with the eyes. However, we do so because if those detectors don't work, then you won't see. Your nefesh won't receive the input it needs to construct the picture that we see. At times it refers to prophets and righteous sages, because they are direct instruments of the divine will, through whom God acts without resistance, and great deeds are performed by them. So sometimes even the prophets called Isha Elohim, the man of God, right? Or the Hachamim are also referred to as men of God. This is why the sages taught that the verse, "You shall fear the Lord your God," also includes reverence of Torah scholars. It says, "Et Adonai Elohecha tira." We have a mitzvah to fear God. How do you fear God? This is et. A lot of the Hachamim, they do a ribui. One of the 13 midot is the ribui. And they learn that every time it says et, it says lerabot, something to include something extra other than God himself. It says lerabot talmidei hachamim. How do you revere God? By revering his scholars. One who reaches this level may rightfully so be called the man of God, Isha Elohim. Why? Because they are the instruments in which God acts. By following the Torah, by studying the Torah, and acting in accordance to the Torah, you are performing God's will, and God is acting through you in the world, right? So you can rightfully be called the man of God. The title combines both the human, right, man, and the divine of God, much like saying a godly man. When referring to God, we use the name Adonai, right, spelled Aleph Dalet Nun Yod, as if to say, my Lord, meaning the one whose instructions I am following and whose will I am executing. In the same figurative way, we speak of he who dwells between the cheruvim, Yoshev HaKeruvim, right? Or miben shenei HaKeruvim, he who dwells in Zion, he who dwells in Jerusalem, right? There are many expressions of this kind, although his essence is one, right? God doesn't dwell in any of these places, but these places are exemplify and execute, when living in accordance to the Torah, we're executing the will of God. The variety comes from the different places where his presence is said to dwell, just as the rays of the sun are many, while the sun itself is one. Right? Again, it's God has one will, he has one broadcast, we'll call it, one thing that's going out in the world, what we call is Shefa, right? And it's perceived in many different ways to us. Sometimes through, it could be through a specific person who was acting in accordance to the will of God, a nation acting in accordance to the will of God, a city, the holy city, right? All these are expressions of God's will. One God with one will. We just see it in different ways, right? These many different names of God, right? Whether he's Kadosh, transcendent, or Ehyeh, the immanent, right? Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh, he is that he is. It's one God that we may not necessarily be able to fully reconcile these different aspects, but we have different names or attributes that we associate with this one God. However, this comparison isn't entirely accurate to the sun. If we could see only the rays of the sun, but not the sun itself, we would have to prove where those rays came from. It says that the sun has many different rays, or there's different sources of light, but all coming, or there's different types of light illuminating a room, illuminating a cave, illuminating the outside, but they all come from the sun. Says it's not a good comparison because we can actually see the sun. We don't just see the light of the sun. If you look up to the sky, you can actually see the sun in the sky. So we know we can see directly the source of the sun rays. However, God, we can't actually see him. We can only see the effect. The sun, we can see the effect and the cause of that effect. You can't actually perceive God with your senses. You could perceive his actions, see the things that happen in the world, and associate it to God. But that requires something. None of your senses can actually perceive God. This is where he's going to get into the inner eye, right? The inner eye is what can perceive God. It's the human intellect. Right, I must elaborate further because this raises a difficulty. How can we attribute place to one who has no place? Right, and at the same time say that what we point to is the first cause. Right, so if God has no physical aspect, then we can't point to any location, yet we still attribute, right, the effect of all of these things to a primary cause, which we can't actually see, because seeing is only for things that have physical attributes. In order to see something, you need it to react with light. In order for it to react with light, it has to have either some sort of size, some sort of mass, right? The answer is that our senses perceive only the attributes of things, not their essence. Right? Our eyes, they collect data. They don't interpret the data. Our ears hear different frequencies in the air, right? Different sound waves traveling through the air. They hear it, they hear the data, but they don't interpret. For instance, your ears hear me speaking, but it's your mind that is understanding, putting together the things that I'm saying, the sequence of sounds that I am vibrating in the air, right? Our senses perceive only attributes of things. They only collect data, right? Not their essence. They can't interpret the data. Take a king, for example, right? Let's say we all see a king or we see a president. You see his outward appearance, his features, his physical form, yet these are not what you honor. You see him dressed one way in battle, another in a city, and another in his home, another way in his home. You recognize him as the king, not because of what your eyes see, but because of your understanding. If you see he has, for instance, sometimes we don't even see him, right? Sometimes the prime minister is driving down Kvish Echad, right? The Jerusalem-Tel Aviv road. How do we know that the prime minister is there? But we don't see him. But we see maybe 10 police cars in front of him, 10 police cars behind him. We see these blackened SUVs. So we know that there's a prime minister there. What we see are just a series of cars with, with the sirens going and the lights flashing, right? And we understand that there is a prime minister there or a high-ranking minister of the government. You may have known him as a child, right? Let's say we can take Trump, right? Donald Trump, he was an actor, right? He's been known for many years as a young man, and then in his prime, and finally as an old man, right? You may have seen him healthy or sick. His appearance, character, and behavior have all changed. Yet you still recognize him as the same king because he has spoken to you and given you his command, right? You've seen him give a speech, right? He's standing in front of assembly of the nation, or standing in addressing the nation. Now it was the 4th of July, and he addressed the entire American nation on the 250th birthday of the United States. His kingship belongs to his rationale and governing nature, not to the suit that he's wearing, not to the color of his skin, not to his age, and not to his size. That is his true essence. That's the function that he is fulfilling. It has no physical location and cannot itself be pointed to. What makes the president a president? It's a legal status that was determined by the result of the elections. And you ask any Secret Service agent who's sworn to defend the president, right? Even take a bullet for him. They don't need to care what the name of this current president is, because they're protecting the office. They're not protecting this person with his ideology. Doesn't matter his age. If he is now functioning as the president, right? That is something that is determined, we'll call it, it's not bound by location, it's not bound by any physical attribute, it's bound by a legal status. The one who fills the office of president. Even though we point to the person and say, this is the king, but when he dies, and you see the very same body, you no longer say this is the king. Or in this case, once a term is over and someone else is elected in his place, right? It's not that person who is still prime minister or president. He's just now a regular person. You see only a body that anyone may move, subject to chance and to will of others, like a cloud that one wind gathers and another scatters. While he was alive, his body was directed only by the royal will, just as a divine pillar of cloud was moved only by the will of God. So our senses don't perceive the essence of things, only their physical attributes. And even in that, it's limited. It only perceives a certain spectrum of the physical attributes of something. But it's not the senses that determine what it's seeing. What's the meaning of what it's seeing? And now back to the sun. Our senses see that is a flat circular disk, like a shield, giving off light and heat and appearing motionless. Reason, however, tells us that it is a sphere 160 times larger than the Earth. Today, we can update that a little bit more. You know, it's actually much bigger than that. That it is neither hot nor stationary. What is the heat even 10 meters away from the sun? Well, there's no air or something to feel the heat, so it's still absolute. It's cold. Space is cold until the rays of the sun interact with something to heat it up, right? All the surrounding space around it is actually cold. It is neither hot nor stationary. We know the sun isn't fixed in a place. It has an orbit as well around the center of the galaxy, and that it moves in two opposite directions, from west to east and from east to west. Okay, we can update the science here in ways that need not concern us here, but that's not really what his parable here is about. What's the meaning is that even the data that we sense, that we perceive, can be misleading. But our intellect can investigate and reach conclusions about it and understand it on a deeper level. We see the sun as this big. That's not the size of the sun. But that's what our eyes are, that's the data that our eyes are collecting, that the sun is this big. However, when we apply our intellect to it, we can understand that it's extremely far. And so if it looks this big to us from this distance, it's also very, very big. And we found ways to calculate its distance. We've found ways to calculate its size and its mass, right? These are all things that can only be done through reason, not only or not based purely on our sensory perception. So reason tells us that it's a sphere, it's not a disk, it's not flat, it's like a ball, it's very large. The senses are not capable of perceiving the essence of things. They perceive only their observable qualities. From these, reason arrives at conclusions about their true nature and their causes. Questions of why and how belong to reason alone. Sensory perception is all about collecting data. Our intellect and reason is about interpreting that data. Beings endowed with active intellect, they call sechel poel, right? It's not just potentially an intellect, it's constant, it's in a constant state of consciousness, such as the angels, the malachim, perceive things in their true essence without relying on external characteristics, right? The malachim, they're called sechalim nivdalim. They're separated. What does it mean, separated intellects? It means they have no physical form. It means they don't rely on sensory perception, right? They perceive things as is. Our own intellect, however, is only potentially capable of such knowledge. That's why it's called sechel bechoach. It's a potential intellect. It can acquire knowledge, but being bound to the material world, it cannot grasp the true nature of things unless God grants it special assistance through the faculties he has placed within the senses. Right? So we have our five sensory capabilities, perception. We collect data from the world using our five sensory, our five senses. But he placed within us something that can make sense of it. Those faculties perceive characteristics that accompany every member of the species. Right? Every human generally has these five senses. There is no difference between what you and I perceive when we look at the sun. We both see the same thing. We're looking at the sunset, we're looking at the same colors, right? Provided that none of us is colorblind or we're not blinded, right? We both see the same circular disk giving off light and heat. Even if reason tells us that these appearances are not literally true, they remain useful because they provide the evidence from which reason reaches its conclusions. It provides us the data that we need in order to reason the world. However, truly seeing and understanding is not what you see, but it's how you understand what you see. The same is true of a sharp-sighted man searching for a camel. A weak-sighted, cross-eyed man tells him that he has seen two cranes in a certain place. I don't know if that's the right way to pronounce it, crane. I guess it's like a llama, something similar to a camel. The sharp-sighted man understands the other actually saw a camel. His poor eyesight made it appear to be, let's say, a llama, and his crossed eyes made one camel appear as two. Even so, the sharp-sighted man can still make use of his report whilst he excuses his faulty description by his defective sight. Right? So we can all see the same thing, more or less. Some of us maybe have better vision than others, right? A higher intellect will understand that, the spectrum of our eyesight doesn't cover everything that's out there. But if we give a certain report, he's able to figure out what we're talking about. So cross-eyed person, let's say, cross-eyed person sees one thing as two. Someone who sees straight knows that he's describing this one camel as two because his eyes are crossed and he's seeing double. So we need to understand that our own sensory perception is also somewhat defective. It has its strengths and it has its weaknesses. It doesn't see everything. But from what we see, we can reason and we can interpret certain things. Sometimes they may lead us in the right direction, right? That, for instance, that it's a sphere, the sun is a sphere. Sometimes the data isn't sufficient to make an exact conclusion. Like, for instance, 160 times larger than the Earth. We know it's much larger than that now. Partially also because we have managed to develop technology that can see beyond what we see. A similar relationship exists between the senses and imagination on one side and reason on the other. The Creator arranged the relationship between the external senses and the things they perceive with the same wisdom with which He arranged the relationship between the inner sense and the non-physical reality behind it. Right? So here, what is actually seeing? We said it's not the eyes that are actually seeing, it's your inner eye that's actually seeing, right? Making a picture of a person, making a picture of a computer, of a sunset, of the sun, right? But even that, think of that as like a sixth sense. But it too, right? It has the ability to rationalize something abstract, something non-physical, the non-physical reality beneath it. On a simple level, seeing a person and understanding his function as a king, that's something non-physical. But also seeing the effects of everything that's going on in the world around us and understanding the cause of those effects and the cause of those effects, and thereby reaching a primary cause, moving everything around us. To the chosen among His creatures, He gave an inner eye that sees things as they truly are without distortion. Right? Shemuel, the prophet, was referred to as Haroeh, the seer, because he sees things without distortion. Reason can then arrive at the true nature of those things. One who has been given this eye is truly clear-sighted. This is what it means to see. Others are like blind people before him, and he guides them on their way. Maybe teaches them how to focus their sight and how to see more clearly. And I see we're at the end of our time. So we'll conclude over here. Right? All these names of God, other than the tetragrammaton, the four-letter name, are just coming to point to signify some attribute of God as we perceive it. They don't point to God Himself. And even when we associate them with God Himself, we shouldn't really be associating these things with God himself. Is God really transcendent? Is God really immanent? Says these are two different perceptions that we have of God, and they're conflicting perceptions that we have of God. But our inner eye, right, same way that our outer eye doesn't actually see, it's our inner eye that sees. Our inner eye could also be too limited to see the full picture. And that's Ehyeh asher Ehyeh. Yes, I'm transcendent. Yes, I'm immanent. Yes, it conflicts. Deal with it. Ehyeh asher Ehyeh. I am what I am, whether you understand it or not. That's what I am. And this is all in preparation to understand that even, and we're going to see in the next few paragraphs even, that even when the prophets are describing the angelic beings, right, they're not seeing anything physical. And even though the description may seem physical, it's not a physical description. We'll get more into that later. But we need to understand the hierarchy, right? We see physical matter. What does that mean we see? So our sensory perception collects data. Our soul, or nefesh, or inner eye, synthesizes that data, right? Real seeing is understanding the meaning of what our sensory perception is seeing, or what our inner eye, the picture that the inner eye is making, right? But there's still more subtle than that, is perceiving things that have no physical form to begin with. And that is where the prophets start to see things that we have no actual capability of even, detecting physically. So if you ever read Yehezkel, right, the first chapter talking about the Merkava, nothing there was something he actually saw. It's we'll call it his imagination making a picture for us to try to teach us something about the aspects of the non-physical world. Right? Same way that, is God really Ehyeh? Is he really Kadosh? Is he really all? These are just ways that we understand him. And so this is like an introduction to getting into a bit more esoteric side of Sefer HaKuzari. Any questions or insights that anyone would like to share? Oh, by the way, we still have a little ways to go before we actually get to Sefer HaYetzirah, right, the book of creation. And think about, for this week, think about, what we spoke about, Kadosh Israel and Ehyeh. Based on what he said here, what's really the difference between those two things? Why do they have two different names? And if anyone can suggest an answer next week, please share it with us. Okay, so that's it for today.
Thank you, Sami.
Yeah, pleasure. Always a pleasure.
תודה רבה.
בשמחה רבה. ערב טוב.
ערב טוב.